If you missed my last video, surprise, I'm pregnant. 23 weeks pregnant, in fact. And I can tell you right now that this experience has been anything but magical. And yes, I am talking about first trimester. Now, if you're new here, hi, I'm Karin. I'm a mindset and behavior change expert. And so while there already is a ton of advice and wisdom out there about how to handle pregnancy, I wanted to create a video on how to survive the first trimester that brings in some of the mindset, behavior change, and personal development expertise that I normally put out on this channel. To give you some context, I had a pretty rough first trimester. I went into my pregnancy, like many first-time moms do, with a general amount of optimism. I was working out, I was possibly the fittest I'd ever been in my entire life pre-pregnancy, and I was planning a pregnancy where I was gonna eat healthy foods and get enough sleep and go to the gym and walk and do my hypnobirthing exercises and all of these types of things. And then 6 weeks hit and I was puking multiple times a day. I was only really interested in eating small bags of Cheez-Its, and I could literally do nothing else except for hang around my house and sleep. And that, for a while, really wrecked me. But I was able to use some of my behavior change knowledge to make a couple of things a little bit better, and so I wanted to pass on some of the tips that worked for me that are based in science onto you. Tip number 1 is to reduce your habit baseline by 50%. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that here at Body Brain Alliance, we use a habit formation framework called the Core 4 framework. So we have our clients pick 4 habits and 4 values and pursue those things for a total of 90 days before they switch. If this is sounding interesting to you, there is in the description linked a completely free resource that you can use to figure out what your core 4 habits should be. So I had my core 4 habits set up. These were my baseline tiny habits that I wanted to be doing on a regular basis. Well, during first trimester, I needed to reduce those by 50% and then reduce those by 50% again. Literally, I want you to take whatever you think you should be doing or you think you want to be doing and cut it in half twice. For me, that looked like this. In an ideal world, 4 to 5 days a week, I would be hitting the gym. Let's take that baseline right out the window because I wasn't even able to eat enough because of the nausea for going to the gym to be at all helpful. So I took that and first I scaled it back, and I just promised myself at the beginning of first trimester when I started to get sick, I would go for a walk every day. I would just go for a quick walk around the block every single day. And then it got to the point where I was really, really sick. I was puking multiple times a day, and even a walk felt like it was taking too much of my energy. And so after a while, and after some great advice from my personal behavior change coach, what she told me was to scale back again. And so I ended up setting the tiny, tiny habit for myself of just sitting outside for 10 minutes. That's literally all I had to do. It took no energy. I was still in very close proximity to the toilet if I needed to get there. And that tiny little habit made a huge difference on the days that I actually managed to do it, which quite transparently wasn't all of them. So if you're in that first trimester of pregnancy right now, or if you're in a place where habits are really hard because you have a large physical or emotional stressor in your life, I highly recommend take your habit, cut it in half, and then cut it in half again, and see if you can focus on just that tiny baseline. I will say, when I was in that place, when I was super exhausted, when I was fatigued, when I was nauseous, having that tiny win of having completed the habit and gone outside gave me something to focus on that was really important for keeping up my mental health. And that brings me to tip number 2, which is track and follow your energy. Before getting pregnant, I did not like to do any type of work in the evenings. I was a strict daytime working girl. Even in college, when everybody else was pulling all-nighters, I was asleep. I could not focus past the time when the sun went down. When I got pregnant, that all changed. I didn't have a lot of energy as is, and I work from home, to be clear, so I can work whenever I want to throughout the day, which is something that I'm very lucky about. And in that case, I realized that I didn't have energy in the morning. I didn't have energy in the afternoon. I didn't really have energy in the evening, but there was a period of time from approximately 9 p.m. to midnight every single day where I could not fall asleep. I wanted to be asleep. In my brain, I was like, it's better to be asleep. I need to fix my circadian rhythm. I need to get my shit together. And yet, every single night, I would lay there and try to fall asleep, and I could never get myself to actually fall asleep before midnight. My mind would just go and go and go and go and go. I finally was able to realize that this was 3 hours of my day where I had mental energy. And so instead of scrolling or watching TV or using that mental energy to be totally paranoid about having a miscarriage, I decided that that was going to be my 2-hour work block. I allowed myself to work from my bed. I allowed myself to manipulate what I was going to get done, so I focused on the really easy stuff, and that was absolutely huge for me. Now, not all of us are going to have complete control over our days. In fact, the vast majority of people we work with at Body Brain Alliance do not have control over all of their time and work a job with strict hours. However, what you can still do is you can track the moments where you do have not even energy, but maybe you're slightly less tired than you are the other 24 hours of the day. And you can use those moments, use that 1 hour you get where there's a slight peak in energy, and leverage that to get the things done that are the highest priority to you. If you haven't read the book Essentialism by McKeown, I highly recommend checking that out. And like I said, if you're interested in figuring out what you should be prioritizing, our Future Self Map mini course is going to be amazing for that. And last, tip number 3 is don't forget that you need mental rest as well as physical rest. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the ways that I was coping with nausea was to do a lot of scrolling. I was watching YouTube videos. I was reading Reddit articles. I was reading pregnancy books. I was consuming TikToks. I was on Instagram. I was doom scrolling, doom scrolling, doom scrolling. And in my head, I was kind of justifying that doom scrolling because number 1, it did distract me from how awful I was feeling. But number 2, I was laying in bed, I was on the couch, I had been told to rest if I was tired, and in my head, I was resting. But then my behavior change brain came in and started talking some sense into me. And we know from science that the rest we think we're getting when we are focused on something, especially when we are doom scrolling, is not actually restorative. When you are scrolling, your brain is using as much brain power as when you are focused on something at work. And so if you are constantly scrolling, reading, consuming, distracting yourself, what that's gonna do is put you in a place where you are physically resting, but you remain mentally exhausted. So what are you gonna do? Well, instead, I recommend taking 10 to 30 minutes of your day if you're in that first trimester space and doing something that requires little to no mental involvement. Color a coloring book. Go outside and stare at the sunset. Do something like stretching that's physical and allows your mind to wander. Even 30 minutes of that type of mental rest, I promise, is gonna make you feel like a completely different human, especially if you're like me and you were spending a lot of time ruminating and being anxious in that first trimester about all the things that could potentially go wrong. So those are my 3 tips for you to make it through first trimester. Number 1, cut your baseline by 50% and then cut it again. Number 2, track your energy fluctuations and allow yourself to follow it. And number 3, don't forget to give yourself mental rest, not just physical rest. Now, if you're not pregnant or if you are pregnant and maybe you're finally feeling a little better, make sure to check out my other video on tips on how to be productive, because maximizing your productivity in the moments where you do have energy is going to be absolutely huge during any kind of time where you have a large physical or emotional stressor going on in your life. Let me know in the comments if this type of video was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.